Landlocked countries are nations that do not have direct access to the ocean. Currently, there are 44 landlocked countries globally. To name a few, Switzerland, Hungary, Afghanistan, and Kazakhstan don't have access to the sea. The economic disadvantages of being landlocked are evident, as the majority of these countries are classified as developing countries by the United Nations. Many of them are among the poorest globally. The absence of access to waterways significantly hampers these countries' economic activities. Shipping by sea is often cheaper than by land or air, making it easier to export and import goods. Compared to air freight, sea shipping can be up to 50 times cheaper. It is the most cost-effective option for transporting large volumes of goods over long distances. This is because ships are more fuel efficient than trucks and airplanes. Large container ships can transport a ton of cargo hundreds of kilometers on a single gallon of fuel. Trucks and planes consume much more fuel for the same amount of cargo over a shorter distance. Additionally, you can load huge quantities of cargo in containers on a ship. For bulk commodities like oil, coal, grain, and minerals, sea shipping is the most economical option. More than 80% of the volume of international trade in goods is carried by sea. This is also why many countries have strived to secure their access to the ocean. Historically, Russia has strived to secure ports that do not freeze to ensure year-round access to maritime routes. One of the primary motivations for Russia's involvement in the Crimean War in the 19th century was to gain control over the Black Sea and secure access to warm water ports. Bolivia has been landlocked since 1904 after losing its coastline to Chile in the War of the Pacific. Despite this, Bolivia has continuously sought to regain access to the Pacific Ocean. They still keep a navy of 5,000 personnel on Lake Titicaca. The country celebrates the Day of the Sea annually, where it reaffirms its claim to the lost coastline. Landlocked countries face transport costs that are, on average, 50% higher than those of coastal countries. They must rely on neighboring countries' ports and infrastructure to access global markets. For example, Uganda's economy is heavily dependent on the Kenyan port of Mombasa. 90% of its exports and 78% of its imports pass through this port. Delays at borders and ports further exacerbate these costs. Goods destined for landlocked countries take twice as long to exit ports compared to those for coastal countries. The problem is not just inbound, but also outbound. These geographical disadvantages make it challenging for landlocked countries to compete in the global market. Landlocked countries are heavily dependent on their neighboring countries for access to international markets. Goods shipped from landlocked nations can take 28 to 42 days to reach their destination due to inefficient customs procedures and administrative bottlenecks. Political turmoil in one of the transit countries can disrupt this vital trade route, as seen during the 2008 post-election violence in Kenya. Corruption is another significant issue. Bribes and unofficial payments are common at border crossings, adding to the already high transport costs. In Tajikistan, corruption is rampant, with customs officials often demanding bribes to expedite the processing of goods. Due to the limited export opportunities, landlocked countries often rely on a narrow range of primary commodities for exports. This makes them vulnerable to market fluctuations. This lack of diversification limits their ability to participate effectively in the global economy. One of the most extreme cases of this is perhaps Mongolia. Mongolia is the largest landlocked country after Kazakhstan. It is bordered only by Russia to the north and China to the south, leaving it without direct access to the sea and heavily dependent on these two countries for trade routes. Mongolia is rich in natural resources like coal, copper, gold, and uranium. Without direct access to the sea, it relies almost entirely on China for its exports. About 97.5% of its exports go to China, making Mongolia highly vulnerable to Chinese economic policies and decisions. Mongolia also suffers from significant corruption. There have been scandals involving illegal coal exports to China, amounting to billions of dollars in losses, comparable to a significant portion of the country's GDP. This corruption has been a major hindrance to Mongolia's economic development. Its GDP growth has stagnated, and a large part of the population lives in poverty. Despite these headwinds, there are some successful landlocked countries like Switzerland and Austria. Both are among the wealthiest countries globally, benefiting from strong financial services and high-quality infrastructure. So how is this possible? Switzerland's central location in Europe makes it a key transit hub for goods moving between northern and southern Europe, such as between Germany and Italy. This strategic position is leveraged through well-developed road and rail connections. Switzerland and Austria both have agreements with the European Union, granting them access to a large single market, reducing the disadvantages of being landlocked. There are several other reasons both countries have a prospering economy, which is a whole topic for another video. It is clear that they effectively mitigated their disadvantage by cleverly leveraging international relations. The United Nations and the World Bank have invested over $15 billion in projects aimed at improving connectivity and trade facilitation for less fortunate countries. With a recent technology boom, the digitization of trade logistics is streamlining customs procedures and reducing delays. Will the livelihoods of landlocked countries improve substantially? Unless they have really good ties with neighboring countries, probably not. If you're able to travel down to a beach in your own country, remember that you have another reason to be thankful.